Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic SHAHADA channel. Mongolia, a vast expanse of open grasslands stretching endlessly to the horizon. It is a country of striking contrasts: harsh winters and luminous summers, desolate plains and sacred mountains, silence and spiritual depth. Locals call it Munk Kuk, Tengerine Oron, the land of eternal blue sky. For centuries, this sky has witnessed the gallop of wild horses, the migration of nomads, and the rise and fall of empires that once shook the world. The image of Mongolia is often painted with the legacy of Genghis Khan, the conqueror whose empire once stretched from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. But beyond the tales of conquest lies a land shaped not just by war, but by an enduring relationship between humanity, nature, and belief. This is a country where the spiritual heartbeat of shamanism and Tibetan Buddhism still echoes through the mountains. Shamanic drums beat in remote valleys, calling upon ancestral spirits. Buddhist monasteries cling to cliff sides, their golden roofs gleaming under the sun. Together, they form the spiritual backbone of Mongolian identity, a delicate balance between the earthly and the divine. Yet, if one listens closely to the wind sweeping across the steppe, another sound emerges, faint, almost hidden. A call that does not come from a temple bell or a shaman's drum, but from a minaret. It is the Adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, rising gently from the far west, from the remote province of Bayan-Ölgii, where the mountains of the Altai cradle a small but vibrant Muslim community. Here, under the same eternal blue sky, a different faith took root: Islam, brought centuries ago by Kazakh migrants from Central Asia. Their descendants still live among Mongolia's rugged highlands, herding their livestock, speaking their Turkic tongue, and praying toward Mecca 5 times a day. Islam came to Mongolia not through conquest or coercion, but through migration, kinship, and the quiet continuity of culture. Unlike the sweeping expansion of Islam across the Middle East and South Asia in the medieval period, the story of Islam in Mongolia begins much later. In the 19th century, with the arrival of the Kazakh people, a Turkic-speaking Muslim ethnic group whose roots extend deep into the steppes of Central Asia. The Kazakhs were historically pastoral nomads, traversing the wide grasslands of what is now eastern Kazakhstan, western China, and the highlands of the Altai Mountains. Political upheavals, intertribal conflicts, and pressures from expanding empires, particularly the Russian Empire in the west and the Qing dynasty in the east, compelled many Kazakh clans to migrate eastward. Seeking freedom, grazing lands, and the preservation of their faith, several groups crossed the Altai ranges and settled in the far western part of Mongolia. Their arrival marked the first significant introduction of Islam into Mongolian territory. Unlike the earlier centuries when the Mongol Empire had fleeting contacts with Muslims through trade and diplomacy, the Kazakhs brought a living communal Islam, practiced daily, embodied in rituals, language, and social structure. By the late 1800s, these Kazakh families had established permanent settlements across the Bayan-Ölgii region, an area of majestic peaks, glacial rivers, and high-altitude pastures. Over time, Bayan-Ölgii became the heartland of Mongolian Islam, a unique enclave where Turkic culture and Islamic faith intertwined with Mongolia's nomadic landscape. Today, the province remains the only one in Mongolia with a Muslim majority, making it a distinctive cultural and religious microcosm within the country. The Kazakhs who migrated brought with them a deep spiritual heritage shaped by Hanafi Sunni Islam, the most widespread school of thought across Central Asia. Their faith was neither rigid nor dogmatic. It evolved harmoniously with nomadic traditions. Religious gatherings often took place in yurts, the circular felt tents that serve as homes, where families would pray, recite Quranic verses, and teach their children the fundamentals of Islam. Their spiritual leaders, or imams, often doubled as community elders, mediating disputes, arranging marriages, and ensuring that moral and religious values guided daily life. In this setting, Islam functioned not just as a faith, but as a moral compass and cultural identity. It governed social conduct, shaped hospitality customs, and defined rites of passage, from birth to marriage to burial. The Kazakh calendar revolved around both the cycles of the seasons and the Islamic lunar months, marking Ramadan fasts and Eid celebrations alongside the rhythms of migration and livestock herding. Crucially, this Islamic tradition was transmitted through kinship rather than conquest. The Kazakhs did not seek to convert the Mongols they encountered. Instead, they lived as an ethno-religious minority, preserving their language, dress, and rituals, while maintaining peaceful coexistence with surrounding Mongolian and Buddhist communities. This harmony was aided by the nomadic ethos shared by both peoples, a mutual understanding of life dictated by nature, survival, and respect for the land. By the early 20th century, the Kazakh Muslims of Bayan-Ölgii had developed a self-sustaining social and religious structure. They built the first small mosques, simple wooden or clay structures that served as both prayer halls and schools. Islam became the unifying force of community life, reinforcing collective solidarity amid political changes. Oral histories and folk poetry from the region often refer to Allah's protection over the herders, portraying faith as intertwined with the natural environment, the mountain, the river, and the eternal blue sky. However, their story unfolded within the broader historical context of a changing Mongolia. In the decades that followed, Mongolia experienced waves of modernization, revolution, and Soviet influence, all of which would profoundly affect religion in the country. Yet even before those turbulent years, the Kazakh Muslims of the steppe had established something enduring: a spiritual frontier, quietly rooted in the soil of Western Mongolia. Their faith survived precisely because it was never imposed. It grew organically from the shared realities of nomadic life, harsh winters, isolation, and dependence on the rhythm of the earth. In such a world, faith was not an abstraction, but a daily act of endurance and gratitude. Nestled in the far western corner of Mongolia, surrounded by rugged mountains and sweeping steppes, lies Bayan-Ölgii province, the spiritual and cultural center of Islam in this predominantly Buddhist nation. Today, approximately 85 to 90% of Bayan-Ölgii's population identifies as Muslim, primarily from the ethnic Kazakh community, who have preserved their faith and traditions through centuries of isolation and political change. On a national scale, Muslims make up an estimated 3 to 3.5% of Mongolia's total population as of 2025, reflecting both the historical presence and gradual growth of Islam in the region. The provincial capital, Ölgii, is home to the Ulgi Central Mosque, a striking symbol of faith standing proudly amid the cold highland winds. 5 times a day, the Adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, echoes across the valley, mingling with the sounds of horses and bustling marketplaces. Within its walls, generations of Kazakh Muslims have gathered not only for prayer, but also for community, education, and celebration. Nearby, madrasas continue to teach Quranic recitation and Arabic language to children, preserving a spiritual heritage that has endured despite Mongolia's complex religious landscape. Daily life in Bayan-Ölgii offers a rare glimpse into a distinctly Central Asian Islamic identity flourishing within a non-Muslim majority nation. Islam here is not just a faith, but a way of life woven into every cultural expression, from traditional Kazakh clothing and calligraphy to the melodic recitation of the Quran during weddings and festivals. The sense of communal solidarity is strong. Neighbors support one another through life's milestones, and Islamic ethics guide social relations, hospitality, and mutual respect. Despite being geographically and demographically isolated, the Muslims of Bayan-Ölgii maintain close ties with the broader Muslim world. Over the past decade, educational exchanges and pilgrimages to Kazakhstan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia have strengthened religious scholarship and cultural awareness. The Mongolian government officially recognizes Islam as one of the country's traditional religions, allowing the province to operate mosques and religious schools freely. This has created an environment where faith coexists peacefully with Mongolia's secular governance and Buddhist heritage. However, the community also faces challenges. Economic migration, modernization, and limited access to Islamic higher education within Mongolia have prompted concerns about the preservation of faith and cultural identity among younger generations. Yet, local leaders have responded with resilience, establishing youth programs, cultural centers, and digital platforms to connect with Muslims across Central Asia. In 2025, Bayan-Ölgii stands as a living testament to the endurance of Islam under the wide Mongolian sky. It is a place where faith transcends borders, where tradition meets modernity, and where the voice of the muezzin still rises, clear and confident, across the steppe. The reopening of borders and the end of Soviet influence marked a spiritual rebirth for Mongolia's Muslims. In Bayan-Ölgii, the first mosques were rebuilt using donations from local communities and international partners in Kazakhstan and Turkey. Young men were sent abroad to study Islamic theology and Arabic, later returning as imams and teachers to guide their communities. The Ulgi Central Mosque, once silent, once again echoed with the adhan, the call to prayer that had been absent for nearly 70 years. This period of revival also brought the reconstruction of Islamic identity among Kazakh Mongolians. Islam was not merely restored as a religion, but as a framework for ethics, family life, and education. Community leaders emphasized both faith and modernization, encouraging the younger generation to balance religious devotion with higher education and civic participation. In 2025, many of the region's religious leaders trace their spiritual lineage to those who kept the faith alive during the years of silence, the quiet guardians who resisted erasure through patience, secrecy, and unwavering belief. The story of Islam under communism in Mongolia is not only about oppression, it is about resilience, the silent endurance of faith when every institution of belief was dismantled. It demonstrates how, even under the most restrictive regimes, religion can survive as an inner refuge, pass through whispered prayers, hidden texts, and unbroken traditions of devotion. For much of modern history, Islam in Mongolia was almost exclusively associated with the Kazakh minority of the country's far west. The faith was seen as an ethnic marker rather than a universal religion, confined to the yurts and mountain valleys of Bayan-Ölgii. But in the decades following Mongolia's democratic transformation in 1990, that perception has quietly begun to shift. Today, Islam is slowly extending beyond ethnic boundaries, finding resonance among small but growing numbers of ethnic Mongols, Khotan, and Uyghur communities who are discovering the faith through education, cultural exchange, and personal conviction. This development is subtle yet significant. The number of non-Kazakh Muslims in Mongolia remains small, likely in the hundreds, but their presence reflects a broader transformation in Mongolian society. After decades of ideological isolation, Mongolia's post-communist generation has become globally connected through the internet, foreign study programs, and international work opportunities. These connections have opened intellectual and spiritual pathways that were unimaginable during the Soviet era. Many of the new Mongolian Muslims trace their first encounters with Islam not to missionaries or formal institutions, but to digital media and personal exploration. Online platforms, documentaries, and translated versions of the Quran have become key tools for those seeking spiritual meaning in an age of rapid modernization. Others have encountered Islam while studying abroad, particularly in Turkey, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, and the Middle East, where they experience the faith as a living modern tradition compatible with science, progress, and humanistic values. Among these new adherents are members of the Khotan minority, a small group historically linked to Mongol Turkic tribes who once embraced Islam centuries ago before being assimilated into broader Mongol society. In recent years, some Khotan families, especially in Uvs and Zavkhan provinces, have sought to reconnect with their Islamic heritage, viewing it not only as a religion but as a reclamation of identity lost through centuries of cultural absorption. Similarly, Uyghur traders and families living temporarily in Mongolia's border regions have contributed to the reintroduction of Islamic culture, language, and religious awareness in mixed communities. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this new wave of faith is its individualized nature. Unlike the communal Islam of Bayan-Ölgii, rooted in family, tribe, and collective ritual, these new Muslims often come to the religion alone, through reflection and choice. They describe their faith as a deeply personal journey, born out of an intellectual and emotional search for meaning in a world of material abundance and spiritual uncertainty. Many of them call themselves Muslims of the Steppe, a poetic phrase that blends Mongolian identity with Islamic belief, symbolizing the coexistence of open skies, solitude, and faith. Interviews conducted in the early 2020s by Mongolian scholars and journalists reveal an emerging pattern. These new converts often speak of moral clarity, discipline, and peace of mind as central motivations. Some express admiration for Islam's emphasis on humility, compassion, and the equality of all believers, values that resonate with Mongolia's traditional code of Tengrism and respect for nature. A few even draw parallels between the concept of Tawhid, oneness of God, and the Mongolian reverence for the eternal blue sky, the Tengr, a symbol of cosmic unity deeply embedded in national culture. Despite their small numbers, these Muslims face considerable challenges. Mongolia remains a society where Buddhism and secularism dominate public life, and Islam is still widely perceived as foreign. Yet rather than isolating themselves, many of these new believers are bridging identities, maintaining pride in their Mongolian heritage while embracing Islam's spiritual universality. Their presence signals the early stages of a cultural transformation, suggesting that Islam in Mongolia may no longer be defined solely by ethnicity, but by conviction. In 2025, the Muslim population of Mongolia, though still under 4% nationally, reflects a striking diversity in origin and expression. In the highlands and borderlands, Islam continues as a Kazakh legacy. But across Ulaanbaatar and smaller towns, a new phenomenon quietly grows. Young professionals, students, and artists who see Islam not as a foreign import, but as a spiritual language of truth that speaks to the Mongolian heart. Islam in Mongolia has developed a distinctive character, one that reflects both its Kazakh origins and the vast natural landscape that defines Mongolian life. Unlike the urban Islam of the Middle East or Southeast Asia, Mongolian Islam breathes through the rhythm of nomadic existence, fluid, open, and intimately tied to the environment. Here, faith is not confined to mosques or fixed places of worship, but woven into the daily life of the steppe. Prayers offered under endless skies, sacrificial rites performed beside rivers, and marriage ceremonies that blend Quranic recitations with Kazakh folk melodies. It is a form of Islam that exists in harmony with the land, an expression of spirituality shaped by wind, silence, and survival. In the province of Bayan-Ölgii, where most of Mongolia's Muslims live, this synthesis between faith and culture is most vividly seen. During the festival of Eid al-Adha, Kurban Ayit, families still gather in open fields to sacrifice livestock, invoking God's name as generations before them have done. The meat is shared among neighbors and the poor, echoing both Islamic principles of charity and the traditional nomadic ethic of hospitality. Even the design of Kazakh yurts, girs, often includes symbolic arrangements for prayer and family gatherings, subtly merging spiritual space with domestic life. For many older Kazakh Mongolians, Islam represents not only a religion, but a marker of identity and continuity, a way of preserving ancestry, language, and collective memory. Under decades of communist rule, when public expressions of faith were suppressed, religious practice retreated into the realm of cultural expression. Islamic holidays were observed as ethnic celebrations. Prayers were whispered as family customs. As a result, for the older generation, to be Muslim is to be Kazakh. To honor one's lineage, maintain family solidarity, and live ethically within the cycles of nature. Faith and ethnicity became inseparable, bound by shared history and resistance to assimilation. This culturalized form of Islam also manifests in social customs that blend Turkic, Islamic, and Mongolian traditions. At weddings, the nikah, Islamic marriage contract, is followed by a festive feast of horse meat and kumis, accompanied by Kazakh songs and dances. Newborns are given Arabic names but are blessed in ceremonies that retain shamanistic traces, reflecting a syncretic spirituality that acknowledges the land's pre-Islamic roots. In funerary rituals, Quranic prayers are recited alongside symbolic gestures of returning the body to nature, echoing the nomadic belief in life's cyclical balance. Yet, as Mongolia's Muslim community becomes increasingly exposed to the wider Islamic world through education abroad, digital media, and religious exchanges, a new discourse is emerging. Younger generations, particularly those educated in Turkey, Kazakhstan, or the Middle East, often seek a more textual and globalized understanding of Islam. They study Arabic, attend online lectures, and discuss theology with Muslims worldwide. This generational shift sometimes creates a gentle tension between traditional cultural Islam and modern interpretations grounded in scriptural orthodoxy. However, rather than causing division, this dynamic has led to a unique synthesis. Many young Mongolian Muslims strive to balance universal Islamic values with local identity, emphasizing that being a Muslim in Mongolia means being faithful without losing one's cultural roots. They reinterpret nomadic traditions, the respect for nature, community, and self-discipline, as inherently compatible with Islamic ethics. The result is a version of Islam that is local in expression, but global in consciousness, deeply rooted in the steppe yet aware of the broader Ummah. Today, as Mongolia navigates its role in a rapidly globalizing world, this blending of faith and culture stands as one of its quiet strengths. It reflects a society that has endured ideological suppression, isolation, and transformation, yet has found a way to sustain belief without severing identity. Under the vast dome of the eternal blue sky, Islam in Mongolia is not a religion apart, but a continuation of the human dialogue with nature, ancestry, and God. In the 21st century, Mongolia stands as a secular democracy that upholds full freedom of religion, a remarkable transformation from its decades of state-imposed atheism under Soviet rule. The Constitution of Mongolia, ratified in 1992, guarantees the right of every citizen to believe, practice, and express their faith without interference. This principle has allowed Islam, long confined to the western fringes of the country, to re-emerge in public life and gradually integrate into Mongolia's diverse religious landscape, alongside Buddhism, Christianity, and shamanistic traditions. By 2025, Mongolia's Muslim population is estimated to make up about 3 to 3.5% of the total population, concentrated primarily in Bayan-Ölgii province, with smaller but growing communities in Ulaanbaatar, Darkhan, and Erdenet. There are now over 25 functioning mosques and Islamic centers across the nation, reflecting both demographic concentration and newfound religious openness. Most are small community-built mosques sustained through local donations, while larger ones, such as the Ulgi Central Mosque and the Islamic Cultural Center of Ulaanbaatar, serve as spiritual, educational, and cultural hubs for Mongolian Muslims and visiting foreigners alike. The capital city, Ulaanbaatar, has witnessed a subtle yet meaningful rise in Islamic presence. Here, small groups of Kazakh Muslims, foreign students, and a few Mongolian converts gather for Friday prayers in rented halls and prayer rooms. The Islamic Cultural Center, established with assistance from international donors, offers Arabic and Quranic classes, hosts public lectures, and organizes interfaith dialogues to promote understanding between Muslims and the broader Mongolian society. While Islam remains a minority faith, it is now recognized, visible, and respected within the framework of Mongolia's democratic pluralism. Despite this progress, the Muslim community continues to face practical and social challenges unique to Mongolia's geography and demography. The country's vast distances and harsh climate make it difficult to maintain regular religious gatherings or to connect isolated Muslim families spread across the steppe. Winters in western Mongolia can reach -40 degrees Celsius, limiting travel and complicating access to religious education or communal events. Many smaller Muslim settlements lack full-time imams, relying instead on elders or teachers trained abroad to lead prayers and instruction. Access to Islamic education remains one of the most significant challenges. While some madrasas operate in Bayan-Ölgii, their capacity is limited, and most advanced religious studies require students to travel abroad, primarily to Kazakhstan, Turkey, or Malaysia. Partnerships with foreign Islamic organizations and universities have become vital for training imams, teachers, and community leaders. In recent years, institutions such as Turkey's Diyanet Foundation, the Kazakhstan Muslim Board, and several Malaysian NGOs have collaborated to fund scholarships, build libraries, and provide religious materials translated into Mongolian and Kazakh. These initiatives have helped bridge the educational gap while promoting a moderate and contextualized understanding of Islam suited to Mongolian society. Another emerging challenge is the balance between religious revival and national identity. Mongolia's secular government maintains a strict separation between religion and state, ensuring equality among all faiths, but providing no financial support to any. This independence has protected religious diversity, but also means that Muslim institutions must rely heavily on self-funding and international aid. Moreover, public discourse around religion remains sensitive. While Islam is generally viewed with tolerance, global stereotypes and limited public knowledge sometimes lead to misconceptions. Muslim leaders in Mongolia therefore emphasize interfaith dialogue, civic participation, and community service as tools to build trust and counter prejudice. In everyday life, Mongolian Muslims navigate the intersection of faith and modernity with remarkable resilience. In Bayan-Ölgii, new generations are learning to recite the Quran while pursuing higher education in engineering, medicine, and international relations. Local halal food businesses, cultural festivals, and bilingual schools are emerging as symbols of Islamic vitality in an otherwise secular environment. For many, being Muslim in Mongolia today is not merely about preserving inherited traditions, but about living one's faith authentically within the nation's democratic and multicultural framework. Looking at the landscape in 2025, Islam in Mongolia embodies both freedom and fragility. It thrives under open skies yet faces logistical and educational constraints. It grows quietly, without state sponsorship, through the strength of community and belief. From the mosques of Bayan-Ölgii to the modest prayer rooms of Ulaanbaatar, Mongolian Muslims are charting their own course, maintaining faith in a land where religion must adapt to vast distances, shifting climates, and changing times. Islam in Mongolia does not seek attention, nor does it demand recognition from the world. It exists quietly, a faith practiced in stillness, beneath the same eternal blue sky that has watched over this land for millennia. There are no mass demonstrations, no loud calls for conversion, no movements for dominance. Instead, there is a deep, steady devotion, lived through simplicity and silence, woven seamlessly into the rhythm of Mongolia's nomadic life. In the remote valleys of Bayan-Ölgii, where mountains meet endless grasslands, Islam endures in its purest form, not as an institution of power, but as a personal relationship between the believer and God. At dawn, As frost clings to the grass and smoke rises from the chimneys of wooden homes, the call to prayer echoes faintly across the plain. Families gather in modest rooms warmed by coal stoves, facing west toward Mecca. There are no grand mosques here, no minarets piercing the sky, only faith that breathes through ordinary life, quiet yet unbroken. Children in these regions learn to read the Quran not in large religious schools, but in small local study circles, often guided by family members or elders who remember verses from memory. Their education is shaped not by formality, but by continuity, a passing down of belief through daily practice, kindness, and respect. In summer, during Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, entire communities gather on open fields for prayer. Men, women, and children stand shoulder to shoulder in silence before bowing together, their unity framed by the endless horizon. Faith in Mongolia, particularly in the West, has always carried an element of resilience. Centuries of political upheaval, foreign domination, and ideological suppression have tested it, yet it has never faded. Islam here has learned to survive without grandeur, to persist through whisper rather than declaration. The older generation, many of whom lived through the years of communist repression, still keep this humility close to their hearts. At sunset, as the light fades behind the Altai Mountains, they sit in silence, fingering prayer beads and murmuring the names of God, their faith reflecting both gratitude and endurance. But this quiet faith is not stagnant. It continues to evolve, finding expression in a new generation of educated and globally aware Mongolian Muslims. Many young people today see Islam not only as heritage, but as a moral compass guiding them through modern challenges, a way to live with discipline, compassion, and integrity. They build bridges between tradition and technology, spirituality and modernity, rootedness and exploration. Though small in number, their commitment reflects a profound truth, that faith need not be loud to be strong. In 2025, Islam in Mongolia stands as one of the world's most peaceful and introspective expressions of belief. It asks for nothing but the freedom to exist, to pray, to teach, to live ethically, and it does so with grace. Beneath the vast expanse of the Mongolian sky, where the wind carries the scent of grass and snow, Islam continues, not as a movement, but as a quiet heartbeat of devotion. No headlines, no fanfare, only the sound of whispered prayers in a language of faith that transcends time, culture, and place. In the solitude of the steppe, where humanity meets the infinite, the Mongolian Muslim looks upward and whispers softly, La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.